I was slicing lemons when I saw the message light up my screen. Just one line. No greeting, no apology. I transferred the funds. You'll understand later. I stared at the words, knife in hand, the citrus scent suddenly sour. My fingers clenched the blade tighter than necessary. I didn't respond. Not yet. Not until I was sure what he'd done. I wiped my hands, unlocked my laptop, and logged into the account. The one I'd opened 3 years ago after my mother passed. The one tied to the proceeds from the sale of her house in Charleston. Her final gift to me. It was gone. All of it. $412, $860 send. Vanished. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I sat at the kitchen island and stared at the empty balance like it might change if I blinked hard enough. And then I did what he always underestimated about me. I took a breath, and I started taking note. His name is Mitchell Lang, my husband of 9 years, CFO of a mid-sized logistics firm based in Raleigh. He's charismatic when he needs to be, forgettable when it serves him better. The kind of man who remembers anniversaries but forgets accountability. We met through friends, dated fast, married faster. Back then, I ran operations for a high-end interior design firm. I was good, still am. People say I have taste, but it's not taste. It's pattern recognition. I see what others miss, details, inconsistencies, the things that don't belong. Like a husband who suddenly suggests joint financial planning after a decade of separate accounts. 6 months ago, Mitchell started bringing it up. It just makes sense, he'd said, brushing crumbs from the counter like it was nothing. We're married. We should be building together. I'd nodded, smiled, but I never moved the funds. Not really. I created a decoy, transferred a portion into a visible joint account, left the real assets in a trust. My mother didn't raise a fool. She raised a woman who knew what betrayal looked like and how quietly it crept in. What Mitchell didn't know was that I'd already started to suspect. The business trips that extended without notice. The burner email account I'd discovered on his tablet while he showered. The late-night calls to a contact saved as Eric, vendor. There is no Eric. I filed everything away. Screenshots, transaction logs, forwarded copies to a private cloud drive he didn't know existed. I wasn't planning revenge. I was preparing. There's a difference. That night I didn't ask him about the money. I poured his drink like always, kissed his cheek when he walked in the door, and listened as he told me about some warehouse software delay like I cared. He talked with that same smug rhythm, like he was the smartest man in the room. I let him believe it. 3 days later, I met with my attorney, Mira Caldwell, over lunch at a quiet bistro in Durham. She was the kind of woman who wore silk blouses without wrinkles and didn't blink when I told her what happened. I want it back, I said. And I want him to regret trying. She leaned back, studied me for a moment, and smiled like a chess player seeing an opening. Then we start with what he took. I handed her the documents, bank records, email printouts, even a photo of a hotel invoice in Atlanta, 2 guests, 1 suite. On a weekend he claimed to be in Chicago. This is good, she said, but I need you to be sure. I am. Then don't flinch. I did. By the end of the week, Mitchell received a notice to preserve all digital communications. He didn't mention it, just poured my coffee as usual and kissed my forehead like he hadn't gutted my trust with a scalpel. But I saw the way his hand trembled. He knew, and that was enough for now. The next part was slower, quiet. I took on more at work, stayed late, let him believe I was distracted. Meanwhile, Mira and her team traced the money. It had gone through 2 intermediary accounts before landing in an LLC registered in Delaware under the name Ridgefield Holdings. The registered agent, a boutique law firm that specialized in asset shielding. Mitchell thought he was clever. He thought using business clients and shell entities would protect him. But he forgot I'd sat through every one of his late-night rants about how idiots make rookie mistakes with paper trails. I waited another week before confronting him. Not with shouting, not with tears, just silence. I left a printed ledger on his desk at home, neatly annotated, highlighted, cross-referenced, the full roadmap of his theft. On top I placed a note. Would you like to explain, or shall I? He didn't come to bed that night. I heard him pacing, heard the click of his lighter. He smoked when he panicked, something he claimed he'd quit years ago. The next morning, he handed me a mug of coffee like nothing had happened. I looked him straight in the eye. We're going to do this civilly, or publicly. Your choice. He said nothing, but he understood. That was the first real moment we'd had in years. Over the next few days I filed for divorce. We still shared a roof, but not a word. He moved to the guest room. I moved through the house like a ghost with a mission. Mira worked her magic. The trust my mother left had teeth Mitchell hadn't expected. He couldn't touch the real assets, and now that he'd tried, Mira was prepared to file charges of financial fraud, fiduciary misconduct, and willful concealment. Still, that wasn't enough. Not yet. I needed more than I needed closure. And for that I had to know who helped him. Because someone did. The day I checked the LLC's IP login records and traced them to a high-end yoga retreat center in Asheville, it all clicked. Ridgefield Holdings had been accessed multiple times from the same network used by Vesper Wellness, a startup Mitchell had advised for the last year. I remembered the founder, tall, blonde, too friendly, Vanessa something. She hugged too long and called Mitchell Mitch like they were old friends. I remembered the way she laughed when I complimented her website. Mitchell helped with the back end, she said. He's amazing, right? Right. What Vanessa didn't know was that I'd already pulled her financials. She was listed as CFO on the LLC. Same signature as on Ridgefield Holdings' annual report. I had what I needed. Now I just had to decide what to do with it. I waited 3 days before making my next move. Not because I was scared, because I wanted her to think she was safe. Vanessa Morgan, 34, founder of Vesper Wellness, former accountant turned spiritual entrepreneur after what her blog called a profound awakening in two. Her Instagram feed was a shrine to lavender candles, handstands on cliffs, and captions about realigning with purpose. I drove to Asheville on a Sunday morning. I didn't tell Mira. I didn't need legal advice for this part. I needed to see her with my own eyes. No confrontation, no drama, just confirmation. The retreat was nestled in the woods, 3 miles off a side road with no cell signal. I parked at the edge of the gravel lot, got out, and slipped on sunglasses. I wore yoga pants and a loose tank top, hair pulled back in a clip. Just another tired woman seeking peace. They didn't even ask for my name at the gate, just offered a schedule and pointed me toward the deck. And there she was, Vanessa. She stood at the center of a circle of women, guiding a breathwork session. Her voice was soft, breathy, calculated, every movement rehearsed, every smile curated. She didn't look like a thief, but I'd learned long ago deception wears nice skin. I didn't join the session. I watched from a distance, studied her posture, noted the watch on her wrist. Cartier, a gift maybe? Or maybe my money was buying her clarity and luxury at the same time. Later I wandered into the main house. There was a laptop open on the welcome desk, unattended. I waited until no one was looking, then stepped behind it and tapped a few keys. The last user hadn't logged out. Gmail was open. The inbox belonged to Vanessa. I took a photo of the screen. There it was, an email from Mitchell Lang. Subject line, wire instructions. I clicked just long enough to confirm what I already knew. He hadn't done this alone. She'd guided it, enabled it, benefited from it. I walked out, past the T station, and left the property without speaking a word. Back in Raleigh, I forwarded the photo to Mira with one line, asset co-conspirator confirmed. Her reply came within the hour. Excellent. Let's tighten the noose. Over the next week, Mira's team compiled the report, digital forensics, asset transfer trails, phone records showing hours of late-night calls between Mitchell and Vanessa. It was enough to implicate her, enough to freeze her accounts. Mitchell must have sensed something coming. He became quieter, jittery. One night I caught him standing in the hallway staring at the guest room wall like it held answers. I walked past him without a word. That Friday, Mira filed the civil suit against both Mitchell and Vanessa for joint conspiracy to commit financial fraud and misappropriation of marital assets. 2 days later, Vanessa called me. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave her name, just a breathless message. Please, this has gotten out of hand. Can we talk? Woman to woman. I played it twice, then deleted it. Mitchell confronted me in the kitchen the next morning. His voice was low, almost desperate. Why are you doing this? I set my coffee cup down. Why did you think you'd get away with it? He looked tired, bags under his eyes, shirt wrinkled, hair unwashed. The mask was cracking. It wasn't supposed to go like this. It never is. He stepped closer, lowered his voice. We can fix this. No lawyers, no courts. Fix what, Mitchell? The part where you emptied my mother's legacy into a shell company? Or the part where you funneled it into your girlfriend's business while sleeping under my roof? His jaw clenched. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. He stood there a moment longer, then turned and left. The next day, Mira froze the Ridgefield accounts under an emergency injunction. Vanessa's wellness empire, paralyzed. Her website redirected to a blank page. Her booking app went down. By Monday, the whispers had started in her donor circle. Someone had leaked the suit to a niche wellness watchdog blog. Not me, but I didn't stop it either. I moved out the following Friday, packed only what mattered: my grandmother's jewelry, a few photo albums, and the antique desk I'd restored myself. Mitchell watched me load the boxes from the porch. He didn't say a word, just stood there in a t-shirt and jeans like we were strangers passing in a parking lot. I left him the furniture, the wine collection, the big screen he'd fought me over during the renovation. I didn't want reminders, I wanted air. 3 weeks later, Mira called. "We've got leverage." She explained that Vanessa's lawyer had reached out. Her accounts were bleeding. Sponsors were walking away. She wanted to settle, quietly. "She'll testify," Mira said, "but she wants to avoid criminal charges." I thought about it. "Fine," I said, "but she gives it all up. Every cent. Public apology too. On record. Full admission. She won't like that." She shouldn't. By the time we reached mediation, Mitchell looked 10 years older. Vanessa didn't show. She sent a statement, read aloud by her attorney. She accepted responsibility, confirmed Mitchell initiated the plan, confirmed she'd benefited, confirmed they'd intended to hide it indefinitely. The judge reviewed the documents. The tone shifted. Suddenly, Mitchell wasn't just facing a messy divorce. He was facing felony charges. We settled out of court. He relinquished all claims to marital property, agreed to repay every dollar over the next 5 years, with interest, signed a non-disclosure agreement so tight he couldn't tell a therapist. If he missed one payment, the fraud charges would be refiled. I didn't smile, not in the room, not on the way out, not even when Mira whispered, "You buried him without a shovel." I just nodded. I didn't want revenge. I wanted my life back, and now I had it. I moved into a loft on the edge of downtown, 5 floors up, with exposed brick and windows that caught the late sun. It was quiet, open, mine. The walls still smelled like fresh paint when I unpacked the last box and lit a candle my mother would have hated. Mitchell made his first payment 2 days early. I transferred it directly into a new account I'd opened under my maiden name. Mira had advised it, a clean break, no paper trails pointing backward. I liked the sound of that forward. I started sleeping again. Not all night, not every night, but more than before. The kind of sleep that didn't end in dreams of door alarms or empty accounts. The kind that began with silence and ended with daylight. Vanessa disappeared from public life. Vesper Wellness shut down within a month. Her site went dark. Her retreat center listed for sale. A quiet little notice on a niche real estate blog confirmed it. Asking price under market value, listed as is. I never saw her again. Sometimes I thought I wanted to, just to look her in the eye, just to see what remorse looked like on a woman like that. But then I'd remind myself, remorse was never part of the deal. What I needed was resolution, so I made my own. One morning, I drove out to Charleston, not the tourist side, the real streets, where my mother's house once stood. The lot was still vacant, weeds breaking through where her roses used to bloom. I parked across the street and sat for a while, just watching. She'd been a stubborn woman, cold, sometimes, but fair. When I told her I was marrying Mitchell, she didn't smile, just said, "Protect yourself." I had. Eventually, before I left, I walked to the edge of the lot, bent down and placed a single white rose on the dirt. "Paid in full," I whispered. Back in Raleigh, Mira called with a final update. "He tried to open a new company," she said. "Different name, same playbook. Delaware registry flagged it. One of our alerts caught it. Anything illegal. Not technically, but it's being watched." Of course it was. Men like Mitchell don't stop. They reroute, rebrand, repurpose. But me, I wasn't rerouting. I was rebuilding. The following week, I accepted a position as operations director at a design firm twice the size of my old one. Better pay, real autonomy. The CEO was a woman who built her company without compromise. She hired me without hesitation. "I like people who've seen fire," she said during our interview. "They're the ones who know how to hold a line." I knew how to hold a line. 3 months after the settlement, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, no note, just a cashier's check. $68, $650.40. The final amount Vanessa owed, paid in one installment. Quiet, clean. I deposited it the same day.
Then I took $10,000 and wired it to a women's legal aid foundation in North Carolina. That night, I had dinner with Mira. We sat outside, wine in hand, watching the city hum. You know, she said, most women I work with in cases like yours, they want blood. You just wanted clarity. I looked at her. Clarity cuts deeper. She nodded. He ever try to contact you? Once. Texted from a new number. Said he hoped I was doing well. What did you say? Nothing. I deleted the message and blocked the number before the read receipt could register. That was the last time he tried. People talk about revenge like it's this cinematic thing. Glass breaking, screaming matches, burning clothes in the driveway. But the truth is, real revenge is quieter. It's watching them lose access, watching them fade, watching them realize you were the whole engine, and now you're gone. And it's waking up in a room that smells like fresh paint, where everything is finally yours. One morning in February, I opened my email to a message from the Women's Legal Aid Group. Your donation helped fund emergency housing for 3 clients. I read it twice. Then I stood by the window with my coffee and watched the city rise. Mitchell took money, Vanessa took but neither of them got to keep my future. That belonged to me, every inch of it.
Spring came slowly that year. The air shifted one day at a time. Softer mornings, longer light, the kind that filtered through the windows and landed across my kitchen counter in wide, gold stripes. I started running again, just short loops at first, down the hill, past the courthouse, back through the square. It helped. Movement, rhythm, sweat. It burned off what I couldn't name. And people started noticing. Not the way they used to. Not the comments about my clothes or the way I held myself at client meetings, but something else. Something sharper. You're different, one of my new associates said during lunch. Like, settled. Settled. I'd never liked that word before. It always sounded like compromise. Like giving up. But now it felt right. I had settled into myself, and I didn't owe anyone an apology for it. Mitchell's payments came on schedule. Automated, impersonal. He'd never missed one. I doubted he ever would, not because he cared, because he was afraid. Mira's terms were strict. He knew that one missed payment, and his name would end up where he feared most, on a public docket, under criminal charges. I'd become something he never expected, the consequence. Vanessa? I never heard from her again. Last I checked, she'd moved to Colorado, changed her last name, started a coaching practice. I bookmarked the site once, read her new bio. It was full of words like transformation and rebirth. I closed the tab and never visited it again. Closure doesn't come in a single moment. It drips in, slow and uninvited. You feel it in the way you stop checking locks twice. In the way your breath comes easier in the shower. In the way your silence feels like peace, not punishment. 6 months after I moved into the loft, I got a call from Mira. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. I stepped out onto my balcony, always. I had coffee this morning with Judge Harper. My chest tightened. "Something wrong?" "No," she said. "Just interesting." He said, "Mitchell submitted a formal request to lift the NDA." I blinked. "Why?" He claims he's emotionally burdened by the constraints of silence. Wants to write a blog post about personal growth, financial setbacks, reinvention. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. Of course he does. I already filed the denial. He has no standing. But I thought you'd want to know. "Thanks," I said. "Let him write fiction somewhere else. You okay?" "I'm better than okay." And I meant it. That weekend I visited the coast. Rented a small cottage on a quiet strip of beach where nobody knew my name. I packed light, left my phone inside most days, woke to the sound of waves and slept with the windows cracked open. One morning, I stood barefoot on the sand with a journal in my hand, not to write a letter I'd never send, not to process pain, just to mark the moment. I wrote, "I survived a man who mistook silence for submission, charm for character, and theft for strategy. And now I thrive without him." I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just closed the journal, walked back to the cottage, and made myself breakfast. 3 weeks later, I spoke on a panel for women entrepreneurs. The topic was resilience. I didn't share my story, not directly, but when someone asked how to rebuild after betrayal, I gave them the only answer that had ever felt true. You don't rebuild what they broke. You build something new, something better, without them. Afterward, a woman in her 40s approached me. She had that look tight smile, tired eyes, fingers fidgeting with her necklace. I recognized it. I'd worn it. She didn't ask for advice, just said, "Thank you, that helped." I nodded. You already know what to do. You just needed to hear someone else say it out loud. And that was the moment I realized something. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a bridge, and I was done standing alone on it. A year passed. Quietly, cleanly. I didn't mark the anniversary with anything grand, no toast, no ritual. I just woke up, opened the windows, and stood barefoot in the light. He didn't win. That was enough. The loft became a home, slowly, not all at once. I added things only when they meant something. A chair from a vintage market in Wilmington, a black and white photo of my mother in her garden, framed next to the window, a clay dish I made in a weekend pottery class just to see if I could still make something with my hands. The firm promoted me. I turned down the title and asked for equity instead. They didn't hesitate. "You're the spine," the CEO said. "You keep us standing." And that was the first time in years I felt it, pride that didn't taste like bitterness. I began mentoring a younger woman at the firm, talented, sharp, reminded me of myself before I learned to read shadows. She asked a lot of questions, took a lot of notes. One afternoon, she asked me how I'd gotten to where I was. I looked at her and said the quietest truth I knew. I stopped giving the best parts of myself to people who didn't know how to carry them. She wrote that down. So did I. Mitchell sent his last payment on time. I watched the alert pop up on my phone. Same amount, same label, settlement, final. No message, no note, no apology. Not that I expected one. I transferred the funds, deleted the alert, and archived the thread. That chapter was over. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, unfamiliar return address, postmarked from Colorado. It was from Vanessa. Not dramatic, not desperate, just 7 lines. She said she lost everything: reputation, friends, her own trust in herself. She said she didn't expect forgiveness, only that she wanted me to know she thinks about what she did, every day, and that I deserved better than what either of them gave. She signed it simply, Vanessa Morgan. I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I folded it once and placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk, not to frame, not to revisit, just to remember. Sometimes the people who hurt you carry their own wreckage, but that doesn't mean you have to carry it too. The next month, I launched something new. Not a company, not a foundation, just a series of small, quiet gatherings. Women in business, meeting off the clock, no agenda, no sponsor, just stories, shared in safe spaces. I didn't call it healing, I called it returning, because that's what I'd done. Returned to myself, my instinct, my center. One night, after the group dispersed and the wine glasses were rinsed, I stayed behind to lock up. A woman I hadn't spoken to much paused at the door. "You always seem so calm," she said, "even when you talk about hard things." I smiled. "I wasn't always." She hesitated. "What changed?" I looked at her, thought about the lemons, the empty balance, the ledger, the beach, the loft. "I stopped mistaking survival for a life," I said. She nodded and left. I stood in the quiet, turned off the lights, and stepped out into the evening. The night air smelled like jasmine and possibility, and for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid of what might come next.